este anhelo guerrillero.
Si de los pueblos su arrojo se junta con la esperanza, forjaremos la confianza que acabe con el despojo.
Compañero, escuche mi sentimiento y que viaje con el viento. Este anhelo guerrillero.
No puede ser de egoísmo el destino de los hombres. Con el pan para los pobres florecerá el socialismo. Comandante Alfonso Cano, en el movimiento bolivariano, marchando con el libertador. Utopias incandescentes que renacen con la aurora, quemando sin más temor.
Yo, I come from me in the stand. I'm in the field and you just sit in the stands. Take that bass out your voice. If you ain't got no gun in your hand, I do what I want. And you don't even do what you can, you do what you told. I got no love for my foes. They can mimic my delivery and copy my prose. But what they can't comprehend is how I stick to this code. It's either in you or not. It's not the kicks and the clothes. They ain't cut from the same cloth. Can't come from the same loom. Fit in similar shapes or even sit in the same room. Confusing authenticity with part of the costume. I'm teaching gifted children. You can't come in this classroom.
Dare to struggle, dare to win.
Dare to struggle, dare to win. We're back with episode 20. We're here with this new lady up here in this corner. Is that Zenzi? Zenzi is filling in for Dr. Yusef, Bunchy, Shakur, and we got Cherie and Geechee. New York, Atlanta. How y'all feeling?
Pretty good. How y'all doing? Peace to the chat. Always.
So you are in New York. It just dawned on me.
Yes.
You can come to the show.
See.
This weekend, I'm going out of town.
It's the next week. It's the week of
June. Yeah.
And it's the weekend during the weekend too. It's Wednesday to Sunday.
Oh, absolutely. Please send me the info. I definitely will be there.
Okay, yeah, I'll send you the info.
Go there and be a heckler. I think hecklers make the performance better.
Oh my God.
There are only a select few people on this planet that I heckle with joy, and Cherie will not do them.
Well, I know who's one. Hey, listen. Y'all welcome to Dare to Struggle, Dare to Win, episode 20 again. We are a CMB podcast talking Black radical politics from our vantage point here on Black Liberation Media, where all the other dope shows are. And we're here among some politicized folks in the chat. We got one of the politicized people in the chat in the screen right now. Shout out to Zenzi. But what we need you to do is take that link, copy it, paste it to somebody else, and get them into some conversation, especially if they got anti-socialist rhetoric. We got a bunch of our comrades coming in who just been on a Cuba delegation. They're gonna come through and holler at us. So yeah, make sure y'all share that link and bring the people in. Tell them come on in and share the love. But Cherie, what's up? I know you had some light build conversation you want to get into.
Yeah, I just want to say hecklers don't raise the bar really quick. Y'all in New York, this is a play. This isn't stand-up comedy. Don't y'all heckle my play now. If I'm doing stand-up, y'all can heckle all you want to. I'm just talking about dicks and other random stuff. But my play, no, don't heckle that. But yeah, as far as like build, I wanted to talk about the cis hetero male podcast thing that's happening where now they're actually standing up against patriarchy is kind of like the new thing that I see is happening. And I thought it was interesting since we had some critiques of feminism a few weeks ago. And I think, I think it still remains like one of the reasons why I still think feminism is important, because I like to see men taking up these politics and kind of being like the oddball out when it comes to the whole podcasting. And I know these men aren't necessarily organizers or whatever, but I think in that realm, I think this is along the lines of the way, the self-reflection that I feel like the feminists get so mad about men for not having. So I think it's a good thing, because then I think even, like I said, with them not being organizers, they're still talking to people that could be future organizers. I think men that are having like this level of conversation amongst themselves, I think it's pretty healthy. And I think those are the people that women want to organize with or feel safe organizing with. So I just thought that was interesting. But yeah, you can play the clip. His name is Deontay Kyle. He, like I said, he's not, somewhat got some baby leftist politics, maybe, but, from what I know, not, nowhere near organizer. But like I said, he says a lot of things that I think are good to the environment that he's probably his main audience. And then we got Geechee's friend. I think I say his name wrong, but he's a Gullah
Son Show.
But yeah, he's a Gullah Geechee man, and he's an expert in language, and he gave some feedback and got into the conversation as well. So I thought it was interesting.
Okay, let's see.
Peace. You may not harass women. You may not have to take rejection. The majority of men that most women do not.
They have to be hyper vigilant because they have to be constantly scanning the room, making sure that they're in a safe situation.
It seems as if women want to perfect the social environment instead of existing within it. If you don't like the negative experiences that come along with like the environments you like to be in, remove yourself from said environments.
Investigators say 26-year-old Quintette Wilson is accused of shooting at a woman several times after she denied his offer of a ride. Harris County District Attorney representatives tell ABC 13 awaited a bus when Wilson offered her a ride. She accepted, but while in the car, she became really uncomfortable and asked to be let out of the vehicle. So he stopped and let her go. We're told she then caught a bus to a friend's house. Later in the day, police say the woman was walking to a different bus stop and Wilson approached her again, asking if she wanted a ride. She declined. As he tried to convince her, investigators say Wilson told the woman she was going to miss her blessing as he was coming onto her. The woman again declined, and officers say Wilson started yelling profanities at the woman. We're told that's when Wilson is accused of shooting from his car 3 times, hitting her once.
She was shot in her back, 16 weeks of recovery.
Pretty long. I don't know if we need to play the whole thing, but
Sit at the house. Be grown.
An East Nashville woman left feeling terrible.
But yeah, that's your friend. And he was kind of, I guess, co-signing him. And then there was a second video where he does like a thing where he was retracting the fact that black men were being compared to like the white people of black people or whatever. He's saying no, that those sort of men are like white women, which I know it's always been a tussle when coming with that certain critique. But I thought he made it very clear of like a particular type, as far as that analogy, like you're putting yourself or you victimize yourself the same way white women do. But yeah, so I just wanted to talk a little bit about that.
Okay. Zinzi, you saw that, I assume. Any thoughts?
Yes, I actually saw them before they were put in this group. Absolutely 100,000%. I have been doing a lot of this work for a very, very, very long time, several decades. And, you can't have this, and effectively have this conversation in one soundbite, but yes, absolutely. 1,000%, 100,000%. And there's so much focus on, just don't go out at night. Just don't get in somebody's car, instead of telling men, just don't be doing dumb shit like this. Like Chitamacha said, never understood the reaction to a woman who says no when there are so many others who will say yes. That's because they want to find the woman that will say no and break her down until she says yes. It's all nonsense, and just, I also like to say me expressing what has happened to me is not me engaging in a gender war. And, you know, this is my first time on the show, so I'm going to keep it maybe R-rated. You know, I'm not going to cuss like I could. But yeah, just don't be a piece of shit. Don't be a piece of shit.
So I just now saw this, and I remember the argument around, you know, black men are the white men of the black community, and I saw these things, and I'm like, all right, like let's have a serious conversation, because I don't think there's serious conversations being had. It's very people who are not really control of their emotions, men and women. But one of the things that I remember when I say that again.
We're not doing the it goes both ways. They're not doing it.
No. I'm talking about in terms of the conversation, right? It could be emotionally charged or either way. But let me finish what I'm saying. So, I remember this conversation made me think of my comrade who transitioned. We was having this conversation, and I think a sister made a blanket statement about like most men are rapists, something like that. I can't remember what they said, but my friend kept saying something like, yo, well, there's no data to prove it. And that made me think about like, well, data versus experience is a tough conversation. So for instance, I had a sister from Baltimore who was like, you know, I'll ride my bike through Druid Hill and walk or whatever. She's like, you know, that's great for you. Like, I'm glad you get to do that. Like, I don't feel safe doing that. And so what I was sharing with my friend, instead of arguing saying data says that the majority of women don't get assaulted, I was like, yo, well, I'll walk with you in the park if that makes you feel safe. And I feel like you can adjust to somebody's experiences without having to be hard argument around data. But there should be a intelligent conversation around data, so we don't make blanket statements and be saying wild shit. Just like we talk about circulating the black dollar and other stuff. I just think sometimes we could be more intentional about how we frame things. And even as Son had to kind of clarify itself, how it read was, you know, black men, general, broad, are the white men of the black community or whatever. Like, and I think I guess he corrected that. But as you were saying, like, well, he was saying those particular men. But sometimes you got to be clear with that. If not, then people can focus on that instead of the larger argument. But go ahead.
I see what you're saying. One thing that I'm never going to do, and I don't have I don't do disclaimers. Okay, you ain't gonna hear me saying all men don't or whatever, because the people that don't do that shit, they know I ain't talking about them. Period, point blank. You know I ain't talking about you. So I'm not gonna sit there and be, no, I don't mean you. Fuck all that. Okay. And you know, I've been super respectful. You know, if you see me as a person that makes blanket statements, is because you ain't listening to me, is because you want to. And the one thing that I'm always cautious, there are people that I don't have gender conversations with because they ain't at my level. I don't give a shit. There are people I don't have these conversations with because it just gets overblown. People argue just to argue. People have this discussion just to piss me off or rile me up. And I'm just like, you're not getting my energy. Now, there's some people that I love cussing out, but, you know, because I get joy out of it. I'm not going to get mad over dumb shit. You know, so it's just like the whole, I remember the, Leah, thank you. The black men or white women statement came from one of the very smart brothers writers. It was one article and everybody ran with it. So everybody was saying it when one person made that statement. And I read a billion articles and I kind of keep it moving. I didn't see it as being a trend where all of a sudden everybody was saying, yes, you know, you are, you know, but yeah, I'm very selective about who I have these conversations. If you're going to bring some bullshit to me, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. I also think it's interesting to now hear like men kind of be able to say that statement too, because I think it's very different when you hear women come from it. It sounds very much like they're just mad at their personal experience. But I do think it's very interesting to hear men be like, I've been around both men and women, and I can still say this, and I know that I'm not throwing myself into this category, and I'm not maybe throwing in the men that I respect into this category. I feel like when men say it, it's automatically understood. Like, I'm clearly not saying I'm the, you know, white women of black people or this. Like, I'm saying you guys are. But I think when it's coming from a woman, it very much can be interpreted as, oh, she's trying to cast this thing on all men, or she's, you know, bitter. But I think when it's coming from a man, especially a man that's, you know, a cis hetero male, it's very much received, I feel like, you know, in a different way, where it would still make certain men mad. Like a lot of men are calling, you know, those two guys panderers now and all these things. But for the most part, I do think a lot of men are digesting it, like, okay, I can actually critique this, and I'm not throwing myself into the category or throwing myself under the bus or making it seem like, well, that means me and my homeboys are out here disrespecting women, that and the third. But I do think even when it's like one of those things when you talk about personal experience versus data, it can get tricky because we know so many people don't report those things. So that's what makes it very much like, you know, you can't, that's one of those things where it's hard to do that, because it's like, yeah, the data may say one thing, but it's like, then I know if I go in any sister circle with a group of women, like it's like 90% amount of like people having these experience in different forms. And it's not even so much saying everybody is viciously attacked. Like I was assaulted maybe like 2 weeks ago. I went on a date and a guy forced a kiss on me, you know, and I wouldn't be like, oh, that guy has to go to jail, I'm gonna like do a report on it. But it still is like, you know, you didn't accept my no, and that still is offensive, you know, and still even trying to confront him about it, it still is very much like a gaslighting situation where it's like you couldn't even take accountability for the fact that like I didn't want to kiss you, you know. So yeah.
I'm sorry, definitely sorry that happened to you. That's bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to ask a question, but I don't think we have time before we get into our guest. But I put the link in the chat. Like Diallo had this article called the real crisis of Black manhood. And maybe in the future, or maybe towards the end, maybe we should do that towards the end. So in our post build, we'll I ask that question, because it's interesting how he positioned that Black manhood was never a thing. It was never created. It was only obviously white manhood and Black men mimicking white manhood. So it'll be dope to get into that. But before we do that, towards the end, we got some beautiful, important, solid guests coming up. So y'all just take a quick break. You know, hopefully everybody turn their cameras on if y'all ready. Y'all take a quick break, and we'll be back with some of our comrades from across that water over there. They just got back from Cuba, so see y'all soon.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He think it buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
We're back, episode 20. We're here with Comrade Val, Shane, and Jordan. How y'all feeling?
Good. How y'all doing today? Appreciate y'all having us on.
That's what's up. So listen, I know y'all just got back fresh in the country. When I left, I tried to lose my passport, but obviously y'all came back, so but it sucks for y'all. No, I'm joking. But I want to open up with this interesting question, right? Y'all had this experience. I want y'all to kind of reflect. I'm gonna throw some words at y'all, and then just just share introduce yourself, what chapter you from, and then kind of share what you feel. But so the words are peace, war, Cuba, United States, and specifically your city that you organize in. So what comes to mind as you reflect on your experience and in those words in your mind?
Peace, y'all. I'm Shane. I'm a chapter lead out of Ypsilanti with Community Movement Builders. That's a tough one off the gate. I ain't gonna lie, Geechee, I like that. I think the biggest thing that comes to mind actually is I think the lack of peace. I'm gonna go off the first word, the lack of peace that we experience here at home, right? Like that's one thing that really juxtaposes our experience in Cuba versus being here in Ypsilanti or anywhere in the United States. There's a general lack of peace that we live with. We kind of look at everybody as a potential threat. And we're kind of geared toward that kind of security culture, not security in the way we want to have security, but security as in everybody's a terrorist, everybody's out to hurt me, everybody's out to get me. And in a lot of cases that, that it is. We do have a lot of predators out here, don't get me wrong, but just bouncing off that first word you said, peace. I think the lack of peace that we experience here is something when we get to Cuba. I don't want to speak for our other panelists, but you almost take a deep breath, right? You don't see as many guns, you don't feel as many threats around you, right? So that's one thing I want to, I'll go off a piece, but I want to pass it over to our other panelists for sure.
Hi, y'all. My name is Val. I'm out of CMB Ipsy. For peace, I know the word right after that was war also, right? I think we're at war here constantly and landing in Cuba. It was an immediate, like, not an immediate, but it's a complete dialect difference than how it is in the US. I feel like they're constantly still at war currently. The war is not over. The revolution is still ongoing currently. And so we feel those peaceful times when we get there, but we understand they're still under siege currently.
Yeah. I think Shane took it, right? I know Shane has been there a few times. So he was trying to like even prep me like, hey man, it's gonna be different out there. And what I can say, that was my first time ever right in some liberated territory. And yeah, the immediate shift in even inside of my body, right? Like it made me even understand how much my body understands the war at home, right? The way that my body, right, felt, how I internally dealt with things, how my anger would or wouldn't arise, right? How my anxiety was, you know, all of those things was completely almost like reimagined, right, by being there. Right. And again, being able to see what is possible even in a war, which I think is something that I consistently talk about here and like in relation to the school, right? Is like, oh, you have to come, see it, touch it, breathe it to understand. And I think I had to go see it, touch it, breathe it to understand what it really means to right, as Asada says, like, right, what are you willing to sacrifice, right? I think that like that's something that we've been having conversations around. So I think, yeah, it did make those things tangible for me, right? It affirmed my understanding of the war. It gave me a piece that I didn't know. And it affirmed like, nigga, this is what I want to fight for, right? Something like this.
And if I can piggyback off of that real quick, off the war point, right? Fidel talks a lot about the battle of ideas, right? So it's synonym to war. But that's one thing that is really prevalent too, is like it's not enough to just react to the propaganda or to deconstruct what's coming out, right? We have to like have a proactive mentality toward battling these ideas, because they're really coming after our youth. They're really coming after the kids. They're really coming after the young adults through the propaganda, right? So again, bouncing off that word war, excuse me for stumbling. The battle of ideas is something that is extremely important for us. And going to Cuba, touching it, feeling it, studying it, and coming back and telling the truth, right? Without mystifying, without romanticizing it, which can be difficult. But we really have to engage in that battle proactively and offensively, as opposed to reacting to the propaganda that we receive. So that's one thing we learn out there too, is like Val said, it's an ongoing battle. It's an ongoing war. And even in a material sense, Guantanamo is still occupied by the U.S., right? So we have to understand this as an ongoing process. The revolution is it's a process, right? It's not an event, but a process, and a long one that we have a role in here in the States. What's good, man?
And the way they prepared those babies, the babies understand the propaganda that's up against them. The babies understand their conditions, and the babies are learning from a very young age.
Yeah. You know, I think that's powerful. And Mel, I'm gonna let you go as well. Two things. The babies, as you said, I remember when I was there, when we talked to the young soldiers who all had to kind of do the in-service with the military, they said a part of every day is ideological struggle. Like every day they have a time allotted for ideological struggle, which is important. And Shane, to your point, I remember Fidel was talking about a time when some of his people got captured in the early stages, and there was a military person on the other side who they was about to shoot Fidel because he was like, I'm with the revolutionary group. And they was like, no, we with the other group. And then the guy was like, don't shoot him. You can't kill ideas. Like you can't kill ideas. So that kind of made me think of that. So Mel, real quick, I said, I'm going to mention these three words, put it on your brain, and then you just kind of share your reflection, tell where you're from, and then you kind of your reflections that comes up when you think of these words. And so it's war, peace, Cuba, United States, and then your particular community that you organize in.
Dope. Peace, y'all. Can y'all hear me okay? Okay, bet. I'm excited to be on. I'm Mel. I use she, her pronouns. I am Minister of Education with CMB Neighbor Program. And I am joining live actually from Ghana, where I have been leading a program with students on Pan-African revolutionary movements. And actually, as you're saying that, right, I was just teaching a lesson today with my students on how do we understand self-determination. And so when I think about Cuba, particularly, right, its history in being, I think, a really key player in not just the Soviet Union in the Cold War, as a nation that is really practicing, right, socialist communism, that lives underneath that ideology. I actually had students who were asking, well, how is that maintained? Do we know if that's the right way? How do they make decisions? What does it mean if folks who live there don't agree with the ideology that they're trying to practice? Right, my students were asking some really deep questions today. So I'm thinking, right, war, peace, Cuba, all of these things came up, right? We talked about the militant struggle necessary that in self-determination a lot of these times, and to keep the ideology going. We talked about the ongoing practice of revolution, how to this day, right, it's not this like utopia, right, where they had this struggle and then now they're a liberated space and everyone is just like chilling, right? The people are working constantly to maintain what it is that they want for themselves and what it is that they want for their people. And that is, I think, like, right, at one point, I think I straight up quoted Asada, right? She was one of my students was asking, like, what about if, what does that mean for the people who don't agree, right? Do they not get to be a part of it? And I said, they're welcome to be a part of it, right? If they want to be a part of it, if they choose to be a part of this, if they want to be a part of capitalism, then like, it's not going to work for them. And we will fight if we are forced to, right? The fundamental goal is peace, but we will fight to defend what we want if we are forced to. And I think that's something that I see the Cuban people fighting for what they want every day, and fighting to maintain, right, what they have every day. And it's just been wild being back for maybe like 3 weeks now. I mean, I'm not back quite yet, but like, and seeing in just this short 3 weeks, like, I think there's already been like 5 different attacks from the United States on Cuba, right, and on its people. The most recent one I got was, the basketball team that wasn't allowed to play, right, because they're no longer issuing visas. And it's wild, right, to see how rapidly these things are happening amidst the global landscape, where we're also seeing things happening in Africa, right, at a rapid pace. And just kind of, yeah, I'm gonna stop talking because I feel like I'm going on and I could continue to go off, but appreciate being here, appreciate the reflection time.
Yeah, all of that is really good. I think for me, as a person who's never been, but and was really just started learning so much more about Cuba over like this past year and a half, I'm just always curious about like, because you guys mentioned the propaganda, and then people will go to Cuba and there's always, well, you only saw this part, or you only saw that, or you only seen what they want you to see, and blah blah blah. So that's why you think Cuba's good. But I just want to know, like, any stories or any things that you specifically witnessed that countered a lot of the American propaganda of Cuba, that you're like, this, you can't unsee this, or I know this isn't fake or lie, like I saw this.
For the May Day Brigade, May Day, very large event, especially in Cuba, not really celebrated here. There were about 5 million people across the entire island that has 11 million people of a total population celebrating. And so, like, that's like the entire state of Michigan almost, you know, like coming together and marching for their government. They're marching for together we create, right? And so like you can't really make that up. Like we were in Revolution Plaza with these hundreds of thousands of people who were more than happy to be there and who were there on their own accord. We had our Black Panther flag, and there were people who were emotional in that moment saying, we Cubans, we love the Black Panthers. We love this. They were touching the flag, holding the fist up to us. Some got a little emotional. Someone else said my mother was a Panther. And so that's real. That can't be manifested like artificially. That can't be made up. The energy that was within May Day and the way that the folks congregated together, US could never. US could never.
I think even
I went to Cuba. I wasn't with the brigade. I wasn't with the group. I was with, you know, a group of people that I knew, and we stayed in the neighborhood. We stayed about an hour away from Old Havana, and I'm walking around, you know, and obviously we stood out probably just the way we dress. But I'm like, that looked like my cousin over there. That looked like my auntie over there. You know, it's just the blackness. You know,
you said that a few times. You were like, that could be someone down the street that we met.
Yes.
You know?
Right, no.
You have to be.
Luckily, most was finished, so we were okay.
I think I saw a handful of white people in Old Havana. They were tourists, like Belgian tourists. But the people, the students, we actually visited a school, a medical school, and got to talk to the teacher and the administrator, just, you know, and just the vibe, the feel, you know, people living their everyday lives. I don't, and the thing is, like, I don't really have any idea of what other people think of Cuba because I've been on this mindset for so long. No idea. But, you know, I knew I would love it. I knew I would feel at home, and I did.
The Africanity stands out when you get there. I mean, it's loud. So this is a report back from a quote from 2024, but one of the Ghanaian delegates, shout out to Mayo again out in Ghana, one of the Ghanaian delegates was speaking at the International Solidarity Conference, which is May 2nd every year. So it's a great, early May is a beautiful time in Cuba. But they said, and I quote, Cuba is an African country with an African people, and they had themselves an African revolution. And that stuck with me deep because Cubans, even Cubans who don't look African the way we perceive African here, we have very narrow national or narrow like racial lines in the U.S. But Cubans who don't look African to us are the proudest of their African heritage, right? So that definitely stands out. I mean, that is an African island, like Musa said in the chat, and they know it, and Africa knows it. And that's another thing that deconstructs some of the propaganda. Going back to your question earlier, that that's not a white supremacist island. It's not a open air prison or whatever else they want to call it.
Yeah, because that's something that I always do hear about, like, even with colorism in Cuba, like you'll be talking to somebody about like a socialist or whatever, and they'll society, and they're like, but in Cuba, they're still colorists and they still hate everything black. And I'm just like, what is that? You know, because I've never been. So I'm just like, from what you guys are saying, it's not, I mean, I'm sure obviously that exists everywhere, but I'm just saying, but it's not as the way people make it out to be, you know?
Absolutely. And to address that point, right, when Cuba, early in the revolution, right, racial discrimination in the legal standpoint was eradicated, right? But that happens, we understand in our experience in the U.S., like just because the legislature come down doesn't mean it's actually a social thing. So there are backward ideas everywhere. Like you said, there are definitely still things to be addressed on the island. But the difference is the government supports these projects and these commissions to address them. So I encourage everybody to look up the Aponte Commission, look up the Color Cubano. There's all these artists and these writers and these different unions and these cultural groups who are constantly in motion to address the racial disparities that exist on the island. And they're exacerbated by the blockade. These things are exacerbated by the embargo. So we always have to, that's the primary contradiction that I don't think we've said yet, but the embargo and the blockade is what exacerbates a lot of the tension on the island. When things get tight, people shrink up and some of those backward ideas come out. But the Cuban government is fully behind the process of eradicating, addressing, and bringing these things to light. So that's one thing that often stands out to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point too, because whenever we look at racism, I guess in our slanted lens, as it relates to a government body doing so, like your race is not going to stop you from getting the food and the basic needs and the healthcare. But you might get called a nigga at the crib, right? So you have to figure that out. You got to throw hands if you have to. But really quick, so I got a question that kind of veggie backs off of something Shane said, and anybody can answer it. As it relates to something I was reading from some of the stuff that Shane shared about unity and internationalism. And I'm curious, all of us being in CMB, which is a Pan-Africanist organization, and as me and Jordan and then was joking backstage, we like explicitly say Black, right? But in unity and internationalism, how do you grapple with or explain, your position, especially maybe, after coming to Cuba and then visiting another country, especially coming from, again, a Black organization who's Pan-Africanist, who focus on Black folks and Black issues? How do you grapple with or explain your international lens or perspective?
I think one, and again, especially in relation to Cuba, right? One thing that the Cuban president said at the International Solidarity Conference this year was that, shout out to Africa, that is our roots. That's how he opened his statement. Just like that, right? And so I think that, again, I think too often, again, we're very stuck in this Black American agenda, this Black American lens focus of things. We have to understand, again, like as Malcolm called it, the global revolution, like the Black revolution, but the Pan-African revolution that is happening, right? That's happening in the Caribbean. That's happening on the continent. Right? That is right in Brazil. I think we have to understand all of those things in one. And again, like Kwame Ture said, right? Like, some of our folks revolted on the water. So like, what are we going to say? Right? Like, we have to understand who we are as a people and, again, see how Africa is obviously our home base and like the testing ground for imperialism, right? But that is being practiced elsewhere in the world. And as we can win our own fights and find solidarity with other folks, right, we can then destroy this monster that we are all fighting. So I think that, again, we have to be learning and in practice and helping the folks who are fighting the same enemy. So I think that, even, again, going back to your questions of war, right? We have to understand that we are at war. And when you are at war, you need allies, even if that doesn't mean y'all are best of friends, right? And so we have to build those allies to win a war.
Anybody else want to take a stab at that? If not, we can go to the next question.
I think that, like Shane said earlier, Cuba has never separated themselves from Africa, and they never will, ever. Like, the president reiterates that. He also stated a Malcolm X quote, like, they love Africa and they stand hand in hand with Africa and they'll never be separated. And so I don't think there's any contradiction between any of our ideals of Pan-Africanism, because to me, Cuba's Pan-African because they stand 10 toes down for Africa, and they've shown it throughout history. There's historical precedents for that. And so they're tied together, one and the same. So for me, it all makes sense.
I was kind of, veggie back on on that one. Geechee, you got me. A couple of things that I saw, just, having a different purpose for being there, walking past a Black church and seeing, number one, people catching the spirit or being mounted or wherever you're coming from. And, just, it reminded me of like Shango Baptist ceremony. Very, very African, even though it, was obviously like Pentecostal. I also went to a place called the Callejón de Himel, which is a giant art house. And because of the people I was with, we were allowed to make an offering at an altar. That's African. I mean, just, having an altar to Shango, having an altar to Ogun, and then going to a club. And there was a moment where they did a tribute to the Orisha. And it was a big, huge ceremony. And this was at a club. So, I mean, Africa's all up and through there. And, not even having to explain it or even having to, because there are no tourists there. This is not, And like, that's just Black as hell. And not feeling uncomfortable at all.
I will say I come from a science background. I love science, and what was reiterated to us multiple times was, as a concept, race isn't like a scientifically sound. It's a societal construct rather than an actual scientific construct. And so there was so many times reiterated on how race isn't real, that how the work that was done, especially with Fidel, changing from like race building to like nation building and building your Cubanness. So they don't necessarily have Black Cubans and white Cubans are all going to say, I'm Cuban. And every single person on that island, and they did gynecology with like, what is it called? Genealogy. They did the DNA testing behind it. Every single person on that island has indigenous, African, and like Spanish blood in them, right? And so there's no separation for anybody on the island, regardless of what their phenotype looks like. Their genotype speaks to the truth.
So I got several questions, and I know I'm not going to get into all of them, but the next one I'm thinking, as y'all struggling here with radical orgs, and you get to visit a country that's on the other side of social transformation or other side of the revolutionary endeavors to protect such a thing, but you also experience like what sanctions and blockades look like and how it impacts development. I'm curious if y'all have like a thought on how you relate our struggle here, right? So when we're trying to create liberated zones, self-determination, and we're also trying to battle the state, most of us, how do you kind of see them being able to navigate sanctions and understanding that, like, again, the state is on their side, but there's an international thing that's blocking them. And then that international thing is blocking them is also over here with you when you're trying to build your liberated zone, self-determination and things. So like, I wonder how y'all experience the sanctions and the blockade and how it kind of grapple with your thoughts as you think about your work here.
May I want to give you a chance to speak on this?
I can speak while people are forming their thoughts.
Wait. If the panel ready, okay, let the panel. So we'll give them time.
To speak quickly to it, when I'm communicating to people in the U.S. and back at home, to different degrees, obviously, but I'm also like, you don't think your hood is blockaded? You know what I'm saying? You don't think it's you don't think they're limiting access to water, to healthy food, to transportation, to employment, to medicine, right? Do we not think these things are not affecting us, right? So again, to differing degrees for sure, because we're a domestic colony, as most a lot of us believe, as opposed to an external attempted colony, right? But that's one thing I always communicate to people is like, look at the similarities and how our resources are limited and things like that. So, but I do want to give Mel an opportunity to speak on this. We didn't get to hear you too much.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you, Shane. Yeah, so how we experienced it while we were out there, I think really materially a couple of ways. Power outages, right? Limited access to internet at any given time. The food that we were being graciously served by our guests, right, was what it was. And there wasn't like, oh, I do or I don't want this, right? They were able to make some accommodations for those who are vegetarian, but otherwise it wasn't like, oh, I would prefer to be eating something different. It was here's what we have for you today, based off of what we have available. And you could even see that, right, in what the meals would be throughout the week, right? If we had rice and beans one day, we had rice and like bean sauce the next day, right? Because what we have available is rice and beans. So I think like really materially, right, we could see that. There were a few moments where the agenda was shifted, right? Or things were just kind of moved around differently because we needed to be mindful of fuel levels and access to fuel, riding around hundreds of people in these buses. They needed to be really intentional about their resources and how their resources are being used. I think the main way that I'm relating that, right, aside from what Shane said, like we a lot of times, right, are choosing how we want to organize. And there are, for sure, right, the strategy of the 501c3 is a strategy indeed. And it does allow for some folks to have greater access to resources. And I think that in terms of what feels really important in terms of how we're organizing from the ground up, it's vital that we, to the best of our ability, are not building our programs in a way that they are reliant on a state that will pull them away as soon as they want to, as soon as they are under-resourced in any other space, as soon as they feel threatened by the work that they're doing, right, that we're doing, right, whatever it may be. I know that a lot of organizations have felt that under this current administration, not to say it's the only one, right, but I know this current administration has like particularly been pulling back resources from liberal and or progressive and or in some cases, right, more radical organizations. And what that's come back to for me, and even for our organization, is if we're able to build programs and to build community and to build a network of mutual aid that was never getting funding to begin with, right? And we rockin' regardless, right? Then when the funding gets pulled, we rockin' regardless. I think on a more militant level, as we think of the ideas of nation building and really getting busy in terms of like what we're trying to build as collectives, it requires us to be mindful of literally where we are, right? We are in a place where we do not control the power grids, right? Where we do not control or own the means of production, the water sources. And these are all things that are important to the lives of our people. And so if we're going to be organizing whatever we might be organizing right here on Turtle Island, it would be irresponsible to be claiming to our people that we are not at risk, right, of being of experiencing a certain level of real violence, right? The same way that the Cubans are experiencing the real violence of their material needs, the same way that the Palestinians are experiencing a real violence of their material needs, right? Because ultimately the land is what is something that we don't own. Not to be a downer, right? But I think it's just things to think about as you're building whatever you may be building.
I like to use the word grounding. You know how sometimes people be like floating in the sky and you tell them some shit like, oh man, like you brought my mood down. Actually, you're grounded. So I don't think it's downing. I think you ground your ass and then I'll make a decision.
Also, for the comment in the chat, the food was hella fire. I'm Haitian and Cuban. I love me some rice and beans. I grew up on it. The food was fire. It was natural. It was without chemicals, right? Like it was limited. It was limited, but it was fire.
They got real garbanzo beans.
Yeah.
What you say?
The rice and black beans. Oh my God. Whenever we had that, I was so excited. I was like, yes, let's go.
And y'all had some ron. See? Ron. See? Yeah. Good shit. All right. Cherie, you got another one?
I mean, I feel like y'all have, I mean, I'm just always overwhelmed with like the Cuba stuff because I'm like, oh, I want to go and like, like experience that. And it's cool hearing how it like inspired, some of the work here. I guess I'm just curious more with like the interaction with everyday people. Like I know you mentioned the millions that came out for the celebration, but I'm just curious because I mean I get all these different takes from like if a more liberal person visits Cuba as opposed to somebody who's radical or political. Like when talking to people like in everyday life or just walking around, like did you feel that people were aware of their condition and why they're in their condition, or were they more frustrated with their communist government, or like what was the overall sense of like speaking to everyday people? And part two of that question would be, how did you observe the unhoused people, or what was your observation? Did you see unhoused people? Did you see a different care for them, or like just curious about that as well?
So I'll address the second question first. As far as housing in Cuba, I think the number is like 95% of people in Cuba own their homes. Any homelessness and things like that is very, very incidental. Because of the shortages, because of the state-sponsored terrorism list, because of the embargo, there's a lot of migration from the east to Havana. Havana is a city built for probably 2 million people, and I think there's like 3 million people there right now. So any of that you see is very incidental, but honestly, it's not very common at all. And again, it's a product of the embargo forcing people from the east toward Havana where there's more opportunity. So most people in Cuba own their homes, and the government is actively working to house people who are not housed or housing insecure through different like hostile situation kind of livings. But again, the access to resources, the ability to put these buildings up, to get the concrete, to get the tractors, right, to get the gasoline for all the things, it affects it for sure. But houselessness and housing insecurity is very, very limited and incidental in Cuba, almost to a zero. But again, the migration toward Havana, the city is overpacked. So it reminds you of any big city in the U.S. in that sense, but without the massive houselessness and things like that. When it comes to interacting with people, everyday people, even if somebody isn't a gung-ho communist, they usually are very aware of the blockade. They're usually very aware of the conditions and why they're in the situation they're in. And many of the critiques that I hear from people about the government are pretty productive and constructive critiques, right? They prefer resources to be moved from here to here, or why are we doing this as opposed to this? So when I'm talking to people, there isn't a whole lot of tear it down, burn it down, I want to bring in capitalism again. There's a lot of people who just have general frustrations. And of course, you're going to be frustrated with your government because they're your government, just like you're frustrated with your parents because they're your parents, not the conditions around them, right? So most people have constructive criticism if there is. But again, like I said, that's for people who aren't the most gung-ho communist people. Like a lot of the criticisms are, I would consider them constructive and like very realistic about like, I think this should be happening as opposed to this. And I think we all should have such a orientation toward our governments and things like that. But I want to give everybody else a chance to speak on it. And before we get out of here, y'all know it's getting close to 6:50. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the International Network on Cuba and how we can get people involved in Cuba work. So I want to close out with that for sure. But I want the panel to address that last question.
When we went to the hospital, the doctors mentioned, there was someone that mentioned like the doctors mentioned that they view it as if someone's on the street and they might be begging for money or some sort, that's not a personal them problem. That's, oh, this person needs help. And then they immediately go get them help. It's a sign of like, oh, this person is needing of something. And it's not just, we're just going to step over them and continue walking down the street. It's like it's a symptom of something larger, and they're trying to solve that actual problem. And so it's very odd to see someone necessarily doing that.
Okay, I like that.
I also remember like at some of the hotels, whether it's the state-owned hotel or not, like some of the people are smart enough to know that Americans are pretty stupid and give away money. So they go get the money. So I think,
and also, even if you're like a person in Cuba may not be a communist, they're still getting all the benefits from their government. Just even if they don't believe it necessarily, they may have their own grievances. We live in a society, like Cuba isn't a utopia, it's still a regular place with regular people who have regular problems, but they're still getting all the benefits of that communist government or in their policies, even if they don't necessarily believe in them. They're still not houseless. They're still getting healthcare. They're still getting school paid for all the way through their PhD, so they still benefit from it, even if they don't always believe in it gung-ho.
So really quick. Oh, go ahead.
No, one thing that I noticed, we were eating we were staying with the family, we're eating at their house, which meant that, they get rations. And so we were giving them money because we're taking some of their ration food. So it's not just that, there's an overabundance of, food. If we're taking it, that's taking, some of the food that's, allotted to them. So yeah, they're definitely aware of the situation. But they're super, we're okay with sharing it with us.
So really quick, I want to ask a question for the panel before we let Shane kind of wrap. So Shane, you were saying something about pretty much the political sophistication of the average person, right? And when I think about Cuba revolution, I think about Nicaragua, who both Batista and Somoza are very fucking similar, right? But with Nicaragua, it's still a mixed economy where there's some private sectors, but the sector is unionized, right? And whenever they don't follow the rules, they'll seize it and nationalize it. And with Ortega and them, they got voted out like the revolution got voted out because the embargoes and with the bullshit ass media there, you can convince the people that it's the government fault. All of the shit got repealed back, and then they voted niggas back in, right? But I kind of want you to speak to the political sophistication that you experienced there of people, as you said, and I think y'all said some of the babies, they know what's up. But then also, like, when you leave there and come back, like, I'm just curious how y'all feel about, and Shane, you wrote this in one of your response, like, settling our quarrels. But I wonder how that looks when we're still trying to build structure in our orgs, and a lot of us are kind of anti-party formation, when a lot of that politicization of the people comes from a party approach, whether the Moncada or the Sandinista or whoever. Like, those people did deep political work to achieve that political sophistication. So I want y'all to give me some reflections on that, and then maybe the takeaways that we should be carrying in our efforts here.
Organization is like super important to the Cuban economy and just the general way of life. I mean, everybody's in a union, everybody that works, everybody that's a student, everybody has a place to be in an organization, to have collective voice and a collective say in their municipalities in those processes. So that's the first thing, is like, we have a very individualistic mindset here, like you said, but like, it's like intertwined and ingrained in the soil, like in the culture of Cuba. Like, we are together, we are Cuban, even when folk don't get along. Like, even cats who are anti-government are Cuban, and then people see them as Cuban. People are upset, and you can tell a sense of like betrayal when they have their anti-government cousins in Miami kind of supporting, you know, some genocidal politics and things like that. But there's not a lot of hatred, right? There's not a lot of outright hatred, even toward Americans. They're very, very welcoming to people from the United States because they separate the people from the government. But going back to your question, organization being like a core foundation of what it is to be Cuban. Like, you are with, it's almost like Islam, like you're with the Ummah, you're with the collective, right? And they don't see themselves outside of that. So of course there's some people who want to go off on their own thing, but again, anybody who isn't in agreement is benefiting from the policies of the government. So people are in unions, people are protected, people are not being evicted, right? So that to me is like some of the highest level of political sophistication. And you see it at May Day when all the unions come out. And Val was going to it. At May Day, we had 700,000 people mobilizing through Revolution Square. That hasn't happened in many, many years because of the shortage, the material shortages due to the blockade, embargo, and SSOT. But 700,000 people marched through Revolution Square that day, holding their brushes, wearing their white coats, holding their babies, holding their notebooks. I mean, you saw the unions, you saw the unity right in front of you. And that's hard to forget. It's like my favorite part of going to Cuba, is being on the ground with the people celebrating International Workers' Day and what that means to them. But you don't see them out there as individuals. They're out there with their banners, with their shirts, with their tools, showing you unity, showing you real union, showing you what a revolution really can do for the unity of a people, for the sanctity of a people.
It's love.
I want to jump in real quick.
I'll be really. Do your thing. Do your thing.
I think similarly, right? The question you had asked earlier around like what's some big propaganda that I was countered, right? Is the idea that like folks can't be free, or you can't own your own, right? You can't have a business, right? And I think that is one thing that we went to a private business, right? And it led to, I mean, there were several moments throughout the trip where I was like, dang, like we are deeply unserious organizers compared to the Cuban people here. When I say we, I don't mean me. I'm a pretty serious organizer, but there are some folks are deeply unserious. And I think like going to this private space, right, and listening to this owner of a private business talk about his duty to the Cuban people, despite being a business owner, right, and being a private company, and right, making his profit, right, and having this land and doing these things, when it came down to like, okay, and then what do you do with these things? He was like, oh, of course, like X amount % of it goes back to the people, right? This is what I'm doing. Like that's not negotiable. And like you said, right, if I'm not doing that, like he didn't even mention like the like government accountability. It was a personal thing for him of like, if I'm not doing that, then what am I doing here? Right? I'm not contributing to what it means to keep this nation going. And that was like a spirit that we found, or that I found, right, all throughout, was just this idea of folks really understanding their role, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that you are in agreement with everyone around you or with everything that's happening at every given moment. But there was just a real seriousness around what it takes to keep these types of projects or these types of programs, this ideology alive and sustainable. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. So y'all watching Data Struggle Data 1 episode 20. We're sitting here with our comrades from all over the goddamn world. A delegation just got back from Cuba. Could you tell us what could the people do? How could they be involved? What's next? Before we wrap and go to our Newark chapter.
Yes. This is the most important part, y'all. Like every time we go to Cuba, it's dope, it's beautiful. You get to meet with people around the world, but it's the follow-up when we get back to the United States. Nobody ever wants to leave Cuba when we go. They're like, damn, I got to go back to the crib. Yes, you got to go back because you got some work to do. You got a lot of work to do. So I want y'all to go on Instagram. I want you to go online. I want you to find National Network on Cuba. Find the National Network on Cuba. And I also want you to find Mayday Brigade on Instagram as well. Follow those pages and keep up with what we got going on. The National Network on Cuba is an umbrella organization. Community Movement Builders is a member of the organization. 3 major goals: end the blockade on Cuba, get Cuba off of this bullshit state-sponsored terrorism list, and return Guantanamo to the rightful owners of the land, the Cuban people, right? 3 major goals. So we operate in everything. That's our guiding principles. Those are the guiding 3 things that we're working toward. With that being said, we are, like I said, it's follow-up. It's going to Cuba is one of the ways that we want to break the blockade, one of the ways we want to bring some material support, but we're also wanting people to organize in their regions. So we're launching this thing that we're calling action committees, Action for Cuba committees. So if this is an interest of yours, you want to get involved with organizing Cuban cultural nights, you want to organize a medicine drive, you want to do a books to Cuba, you want to do athletic stuff to Cuba, tap in with these Instagram pages, National Network on Cuba, Mayday Brigade, and let us know where you're from. Let us know where you're at so we can tap you in with the Action for Cuba committees in your state, in your region, in your city. We also want to continue to bring people to the island. Going is like Jordan said, touching it, smelling it, feeling it. This is how you really get your firsthand experience and really break down these propaganda that we're drilled with every day. And one more campaign that we're working on, Crates for Cuba. So with the Mayday Brigade, everybody is expected to bring a suitcase or a duffel bag full of material aid. It could be school supplies, over-the-counter medicines, stuff like that. We're taking it to a new level, a couple new levels, right? With Crates for Cuba, shipping containers full of material aid to get to the island. This is how we really put a dent in this blockade. This is how we really make our mark and let Cubans know, and they already know, but they're not alone. They're never alone, right? So we want to get involved in these processes, but if you want to get involved in Cuba work, please follow National Network on Cuba. Please follow Mayday Brigade on Instagram. Go online, send an email, send a DM, and we can tap you in with the work that's going on nationally. But right now is a key time for us to continue to push Cuba, to normalize Cuba, and to break this blockade, because I personally think we can do it. I think we can do it in our lifetime with the right level of organization. And that's one thing the Cubans teach us: organize.
Cuba, see?
Blockade.
No.
Shout it out. Yo, appreciate y'all. Listen, y'all, anytime y'all want to come back, please come back, stop through. If y'all want to be guest host, stop through, all that. Appreciate y'all for your work and struggling. So we'll see y'all soon, and stay tuned. We'll be back with Newark Chapter.
I'm throwing copper at the coppers, but I'm shaking like Morocco. Say my prayers with the pistol, serve the sinners with the chopper. All my buddies got it from scratch. My house had Betty Crocker. His mama owned D. He ain't even get no shot up. Profit is invisible. Profit come from product. He thinking buffet. He can't comprehend no potluck. God bless the child with his own powder to rock.
We're back. Dope ass panel. We here with this African over here up in Newark. I kept saying Newark. I'll be just making up my own names for y'all. Josh, what's up? How you feeling?
Peace. Yeah, glad to catch the end of that. That sounded like a great conversation. I'm excited to be here to talk a little bit about what we're trying to do here.
Absolutely. So, Josh, y'all are one of the newest additions to the CMB roster. Kind of tell us about, what y'all got going on and how it's been in the short time you've been in CMB.
Yeah, no, it's been cool. So we're 2 months today, actually. So we kind of officially launched in April. The idea kind of started, around the end of 2024, beginning of 2025. A comrade within the organization had been having a lot of conversations with Kamal just about, the connections to kind of Newark and, some of the different kind of stuff that we've seen, that you all have seen in Atlanta, and how that kind of manifests in Newark as well. So I think it made a lot of sense to bring a CMB chapter in Newark. And so, yeah, we've just been kind of tapping in with a couple like specific different things, right? Like, so one of the specific things that we've been kind of thinking about now is around Delaney Hall. So I know they've talked a little bit about that on Black Liberation Media, on a couple other things, but just, I guess, for a little bit of background, right? So in February, like the end of February, it was announced the GEO Group, which is like a notorious kind of private detention center kind of facility operator, made an agreement with ICE around Delaney Hall reopening it. It's key to know that Delaney Hall actually was open in Newark from 2011 to 2017. So this is just like kind of the reopening aspect of it. But, you know, all the kind of language around, you know, enforcing kind of Trump's specific, you know, war on immigrants. And so there's been a lot of like kind of different, you know, organizations and, you know, protests around Delaney Hall, like CMB Newark. We have been down there supporting different organizations there. And so this actually, it was actually open kind of at the beginning of May. And so with that kind of opening, again, there's been kind of people day to day on the ground, you know, and we've been down there a couple of times kind of supporting. And so just because we kind of just in the beginning stages, we haven't like, I guess we've been more of like a supportive stage for other different organizations. Like I want to shout out COSECHA, immigrant defense organization within Newark that has been doing a lot of. But we really want to make this kind of one of our campaigns, and that's where we're kind of moving forward towards. And I think there's like a couple key points that we want to kind of hit with that. And I think the first thing is that I think with, you know, immigration, people and what we've kind of heard around in Newark is like, don't think about it as a Black issue, right? So specifically, you know, thinking about like kind of brown folks, and some of the kind of rhetoric that we've heard around is like, you know, oh, sorry to them, but, you know, what can we kind of really do about it? And so I think one of the first things that we want to kind of, you know, highlight, and I think shout out to comrades in the Black Alliance for Peace, New Jersey and NY, which I'm also a part of. But just highlighting again specifically that like from 2020 to 2024, there were 1,000 Haitians that were kidnapped by ICE through that period, right? So it is, if we think about it, these are our folks, right? So these are Black people, and we're all kind of connected and Africans in totality. So making sure like kind of making that clear, but again, just generally, you know, specifically with Newark, you know, it's about 47% Black. And so this is, you know, this is a Black city effectively, right? So this is our kind of place. And is this kind of the place that we want to kind of have? Is this kind of the place that we want to kind of build? And I think the other secondary thing around that is just kind of using that as a launching point, just to kind of have that conversation around building community power, right? So I think a lot of some of the rhetoric that we've seen, I know you kind of all have kind of heard about this, is just like a rallying force around kind of like, you know, more of the electoral politics side of it. And so a lot of stuff has been kind of around Baraka and, you know, some of the different laws that can kind of be pushed to kind of stop detention centers from being put in place. And so again, no knock to that type of stuff. I think that work is definitely needed in certain spaces, but also just thinking about, you know, what can we as a people do? What can we do to kind of organize, to pull together, to have our kind of own like grassroots political agendas, and what are we really trying to put forward, right? Because I think important context to this is that in 2021, New Jersey had a law that actually effectively banned immigration detention centers. So, you know, they're not supposed to be any in New Jersey in totality, and so. But in 2023, and I think this is also important context to think about, just because I think a lot of the rhetoric around Delaney Hall has been around Trump. But when Biden was actually in office, he was supporting of the effort for Core Civic, which is another kind of immigrant private operator, detention center operator, of getting the lawsuit against that specific law, and that actually got shut down. And so that's kind of in the courts now, right? But again, I think ultimately it points to the fact that there are some limitations with these different legislative spaces. And so trying to figure out kind of what can we do as a people? How can we kind of come together and think about building that kind of community power? So I think that's the one big thing. And then the other thing that definitely we'll want to mention is something that we've kind of done recently and kind of have been thinking about building out. And so what we had last week was kind of like a community organization town hall. And so what we did is we, you know, thinking about Newark has a rich political history, right? Specifically, kind of in the 60s and 70s when there were a lot of the Newark Black Power conferences. And so thinking about in the spirit of that and knowing that, some of us, so me specifically, I'm not originally from Newark. I'm actually from North Carolina. So, trying to ground really into, the folks that are actually there that have kind of always been there and kind of know the lay of the land. And so not just kind of, jumping in and say, oh, CMB Newark knows everything about this, right? So really trying to ground, be intentional, think about what other organizations are kind of doing and figuring out where we kind of want to put our steps best foot forward. And so that's been really exciting. We had our first kind of talk last week. And I think it went really well. We got a range of different perspectives, and I think that's something that we want to continue to build and continue to serve as this kind of coordinating force as well within Newark, because there's a lot of different organizations within Newark. But I think from what we've kind of heard, it's like a little bit siloed. So how can we kind of come together, build unity, and work to kind of push forward our separate agendas?
Appreciate that. That's very politically mature an approach. I really appreciate that. Ladies, what y'all got?
Yeah, I mean, you gave me a lot to think about. I think it's just kind of dope, kind of starting your own, beginning a chapter somewhere. And I'm always just like, well, where do you start? Like, I mean, so I guess I'm just curious to learn more about, like, I think the biggest thing that you already mentioned is connecting to other people that are already doing the work. But as far as like the formation of CMB there, like, I know with most of the chapters, they have like committees and stuff like that. So is that something that you're building out too? Like, maybe like a liberation program like we do, or like a political education program, or just, I'm just curious of like some of the actual committees that you're looking to like build when it comes to Newark.
Yeah, no. So we're still kind of in the beginning planning stages for sure. I think we've definitely thrown around a lot of those ideas and take kind of inspiration for all the work that we see the other different chapters doing. I think when we think about, again, I think as you all know as CMB members, like the kind of 4 different pillars that we're kind of like expected to kind of do work around. I think Delaney Hall would definitely be kind of one of our campaigns if you want to like kind of place it in that standpoint. We have thrown around ideas around potentially like doing like a potential literacy program. There have been, calls within the community of something like that for a specific community center that we know within Newark. So that's another idea. And so I don't think we've like specifically organized the communities yet because we're still kind of growing. I think we have like 9 members now and looking to expand a little bit. So we're getting to the capacity where we can kind of build that out. But we're definitely still kind of working through some of those ideas. It's funny enough, we had a call about an hour ago to talk about some of those kind of next steps to kind of get a little bit more serious and think about like where we really want to go. But I think, Delaney Hall is definitely like kind of the first initial, like in terms of like the program that we want to do a campaign around that and to have these different kind of community conversations, bringing people around specifically in the Black community to kind of think about these things and think about like how we feel about it. And then also, kind of raise the consciousness around that. Specifically. And so I think that would probably be the main one that we're going to kind of focus on. And then, from there, we're kind of going to build out as we see fit.
Peace, how you doing? I know that there are a lot of similarities amongst different CMB chapters. What issues, needs did you see in Newark that led you to believe a CMB chapter would be a good idea in that area? And you said you've been.
I think that makes sense.
How long have you been in Newark?
So I've been around the area for about 3 years, and I actually didn't start organizing until about a year ago. So still relatively new to the space. But I think specifically when thinking about CMB, right? Like, so there's been a kind of big thing around the police, right? So just thinking about, I guess, for context, and so what we've kind of been learning a little bit about is like the backdrop in kind of the 60s and 70s. There was a thing called the Newark Uprising, right? And so with that, what happened specifically that kind of sparked it was police brutality against a cab driver, right? And so within that context, that kind of sparked some riots for 4 days where, National Guard kind of came in, like they kind of sent everybody and like dozens of people were actually kind of killed. And so with that political backdrop kind of started all the different kind of political conferences that happened in Newark. And so that legacy of kind of police brutality has kind of continued. And also specifically in Newark, they do have like kind of a cop city within that center that's being built, right? And so I think that kind of connected specifically, with the work that kind of CMB is doing. And then also just thinking about, gentrification and housing, right? Like, so a lot of private developers are coming into Newark, buying up stuff. A lot of people rent in Newark, right? So I think within those kind of two contexts, definitely made it feel like, okay, CMB is definitely needed here, especially just kind of with the work that we've seen in other places. And I think, again, that's another kind of thing that I think about that we want to do, kind of organize around housing, right? And I think we definitely want to tap in with other CMB chapters or kind of what the work that has been doing, specifically, in Atlanta as well. So I'm definitely excited to get there, but I guess that's kind of like the impetus of it.
So, quick question. I know you said you're new to it, and obviously the good sister Renee is up there, the run sheet queen. And there are some different things with chapters, and but I wonder if you even feel, or y'all have like entertained like an electoral strategy, because even at the conference that was like a session, a plenary, and a plan, but like, is there any like talks around like, okay, how are we gonna engage maybe electoral politics, and is there a method to use it, or way to use it?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this stage we haven't got to that step in terms of thinking about engaging it. But again, as you kind of mentioned, Renee is in the chapter as well, so shout out Renee. And she's obviously in the Green Party, right? And so she's in kind of that space. And I think some of the work, some of the work that she's kind of done, and also that we've kind of seen around New Jersey, right, with like kind of the Green Party with the PSL. So I'm sure that kind of will factor in as we kind of develop. Because I think one of the things that we're kind of, I guess, thinking through in terms of like electorally, right, like is kind of what we've been reading with Nation Within Nation, I think, is that with the Newark Black Power conferences, like a lot of the kind of push towards that, right, was the election of the first Black mayor, right? And so that happened, right? Kenneth Gibson happened in that standpoint, but then it's like, for a standpoint, like, yeah, it is a change. It is I guess when you think about the reality has kind of changed a bit. But again, like from that, where have we gone with that? And so how can we kind of think about electoral politics in a different way to kind of really push the agendas that we want to do? And so, yeah, I wouldn't say specifically we have like a specific plan around that, but I'm sure it's something that we'll factor into and that we'll kind of continue to think about and develop.
That's what's up, man. So listen, we know somebody in Newark right now sitting on their couch, ain't doing shit. You ain't doing nothing. You might as well join CMB. Y'all remember that commercial? Y'all too young for that.
You're sitting on your couch. I remember him.
Word, but listen, Josh, thank you for coming on, man. Tell us any updates or anything that you got coming up that people should look out for or can get involved with.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing, like Geechee was saying, definitely tap in with us. So our email is cmb.newark@gmail.com. So whether you are looking for an organization or if you are an organization, right, because we're all about kind of coordinating with other organizations, feel free to tap in with us. We're looking to kind of build, I think, with these town halls, we're looking to kind of do those kind of quarterly. So those will kind of be coming up. And then I think within the next couple months, we'll definitely be doing, different community conversations, specifically around Delaney Hall, but we have some other things in the work. So definitely be on the lookout.
Josh from Newark. Appreciate you, Josh. Thanks for coming through. Anytime you want to come through, hit me up. You got a free ticket here. Front stage. Appreciate you, bro. Good work, yo.
Right. Thanks.
So listen, ladies, we did episode 20, like, we owed us some money. Is that a rhyme? I think that's a rhyme. I think I should do it. I think I should do an album, yo. I think I should do an album.
Your bars ain't hitting on mine, but you all right. Yeah, I
can use some amusement. Go ahead, set it off.
Niggas be hating, bro. I don't understand. Listen, anyway, how we gonna wrap up? How y'all feel about the start? We got the light bill talking about some Black men defending the women from this patriarchal craziness, and then you have we have the report back, and then obviously the update from Josh. How y'all feeling? What kind of reflection y'all got?
I'm feeling good. I think it's a good show. I think I think there's definitely more to that conversation. I definitely look forward to having more like Black men and women talking about, more pros, cons of feminism and, anti-patriarchy conversations and anti-misogyny, anti-gender war stuff. I think those are always important to have because, I think once we discuss these things, we're able to all come together and, not want to organize separately. So yeah, I think that's always important. The Cuba stuff is great. I definitely want to tap in. I definitely would love to go to Cuba within like the next couple of years and really see for myself. Because I've heard great experiences from your experience, Geechee, to the people that we just had on the panel. I just think that and even Zinzi sharing some of her stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I really do want to experience and see it for myself. And yeah, it's dope to hear what's happening in Newark. I did live in Jersey City for a year. So, it's always dope to hear about stuff like that. It just made me think, oh yeah, I need to invite them to the show too. But, maybe it's a bit of a trip, but it definitely, I'm gonna tap in to see, who all in the organizing space up there, maybe interested in seeing the show. Cause I think that would be, dope to come together on some art stuff. So yeah.
Word. Zinzi, what you got? What's your thoughts, reflections?
My thoughts, reflections. Excellent show. The whole discussion around feminism, I think people need to stop being afraid of the damn word. Like just the very word has them running in another direction. But I absolutely think that a more nuanced, healthy, sane conversation needs to continue with that. And that I'm gonna leave it at that because I might start cussing again. So I'm not gonna do that. The Cuba, excellent. I love just learning more about the work people are doing in Cuba and, what they're getting out of it and interacting with the people. Even though I didn't go there with the brigade, I got to just be with Cuban people, just living there every day, day to day. And it was just like, that's family. So I love that. I actually, I don't know if we have time to talk about Diallo's article. It reminded me that there are a lot of things that I agree with that Diallo says, although his approach may be a little, because I've been saying this for years. It's the patriarchy. And it's also too many of us mimicking and emulating Eurocentric ideas of what manhood is and what is feminine and masculine without even being aware of it. And that's something that needs to die. It's like, that's the enemy right there.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we can grapple with it a little bit. I'll put it in the chat too. And I'll do wait, what am I doing? Oh, I'll do my little report back or response, and then we can grapple with that a little bit. So yeah, I think
I'm sorry. This is a suggestion for all BLM shows. Put the links in the description after the show is over so that we can go in there and find what was talked about. Like, they're
already in the show. The links are in our show.
Not all the time.
Me and Jared normally try to do that when we set the show up. So I don't know about the rest of them churning.
Right.
But so yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Like, I think it was a dope conversation. And I actually like to listen to those conversations more to learn. And but I think having a conversation with Black men's pursuit of Eurocentric ideas of manhood is probably a tough conversation that niggas ain't ready to have. So I think that would be a good ass conversation. In terms of the Cuba report back, we had a short time, and with multiple people on the panel, it makes it even harder. But like, I wanted to get into more conversation around over there seeing social transformation and over here experiencing social degradation. Like, it's really, especially when you're trying to build organization and movement and all of the other shit. And as I was saying with Shane, like, Shane was writing on that piece that he for his report back about, we needed to settle our quarrels. And I'm like, what does settling your quarrels look like when you also are still trying to build structure so that you can contend for power? People are not really in the party formation type or governance structures, like mostly programs and mutual aid, if they're built to mutual aid yet. And so I kind of wanted to grapple with that. And then this last thing, right? So one thing I always hope to hear when people talk about they visit a revolutionary country and then they want to do some revolution here, it's like, again, how they look at the tool of electoral politics, how they look at the tool of putting your plan and your policies out there before the people so they can see the contradictions, right? So even when you think about the Moncada plan, Fidel and the crew, like they had a strategy and they put that out there even before they attacked the garrison. They kind of put their stuff out there before the people. And I just think it's always interesting for me to hear that, because like those young people in Cuba and Nicaragua, Venezuela, those people were politicized through deep organizing and getting party formation. People be able to tell you like, this is a new society we're going to build, this is how we're going to get there. And they don't just like romanticize this idea like, oh, we all revolutionaries, but they actually have a program of action, program of policies to be like, this is the roadmap to this particular thing. And then they struggle for it. Yes, still have programs, yes, still have mutual aid, but like being able to show the contradictions of the state, struggle with the state is just drastically important. And every revolution that I study, like they have a revolutionary party that is ready to govern, right? We don't want the sky for the elephant situation when them buckers leave, and then now we running with our head cut off. So yeah, I always like to have more those conversations and see how people experiences when they come back, right? And I would say go again, go to Nicaragua, go to Venezuela.
I also think that, you know, when you're born into a mindset, when you're born into a culture, when you're born into a particular social system, it's easier to live in that system as opposed to, you know, trying to convince other people that system is better than the one that we're in now. You know, and even when, you know, and I'm not even trying to idealize, but seeing Cubans just kind of live their every day and be happy and smiling and, you know, sharing, you know, what little they have. To me, I think even if the you know, the blockade is stronger, you know, especially with the person in office now, even if it's more restrictive, I still don't see them revolting against their government or their society. Mm-hmm. You know, they're just going at like, hey, we tighten our belts, we just have to, you know, do it again. You know, as opposed to, you know, somebody has to buy, you know, fewer groceries in, you know, in Queens, and it's, you know, they're about to have a meltdown. I don't know.
Yeah,
it's very hard to like condition somebody out of something that they've been in their entire lives when they've been told that, you know, this is just the natural order of things. Like capitalism is just natural.
Yeah, but I hear that, but again, I think these people have done that, and they're on the other side of it. Like, because I mean, a lot of them was dominated for quite some time.
Right, but they're you know, their ancestors and their forefathers. And there are some people that are still alive during the time Batista, you know, got overthrown and everything. But the younger people that were born in like, you know, the 90s and even 2000, they were already into this system. Fidel was already residing.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like, you know, hey, we have to, you know, change this entire structure, because that happened before they were born.
Yeah, I get it. And then they got a bunch of losers in Miami lying about shit. So
oh my God, let's not even. And I wonder, I may be right, even though yes, there is not a whole lot of like, I mean, there's colorism everywhere, but it's not as, you know, in your face in Cuba. I'm pretty sure that the majority of Cubans that went to Florida are the white ones.
Yeah, I think if that's what happens. I think the ones in Miami can be so anti-black, so anti everything that people just think that's what people think of Cuba, and then it just becomes this thing of them that they're never realizing that those are like the people that, you know, I mean, not but the traitors. So it's like, you know, they're not realizing that like that's what a lot of people don't get that. They're like, they go off of like, oh, these people in Cuba and these people from Cuba that are in Miami are like, that's the personality of Cuba. And it's like, like y'all don't even understand. Those are not the representatives. Like,
exactly. And I have by marriage, I have, you know, old Cubans in my family, like in their 70s, you know, and they dark like me. So, you know, I've seen both sides, and you go to Florida, and it's like, what? Where did all these white folks come with these heavy Spanish accents? Yeah, I think the white Cubans are making it bad. Yeah, making everybody else look bad, but
yeah.
Them Bucker Cubans. Bucker.
Can I just address one thing in the comments really quick? I just want to say, because Leah asked me a question really quick in the comments about feminism and my thoughts since Khadijah. And I think I still stand the way I stand in the end of that episode was yeah, I definitely see all the critiques, but I think it's kind of laying out more this past few weeks where I just kind of see, I think there are a lot of feminists, Black feminists that kind of take it very overboard. I'm speaking more on the liberal side. And I do think that that is dangerous. And then I also do very much like this new wave of Black male, cis hetero, semi-feminist. I like that wave too. So I mean, I don't know. I just see the pros and the cons, you know, maybe we don't have to call it a feminism, you know, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's very beneficial. And I think that's, you know, kind of my issue with the critique of feminism is that I never wanted to counter into, you know, then men being like F feminism, because a lot of them that aren't in organizing spaces, they're not going to take the time to break down, okay, a liberal or Eurocentric feminism versus like actually trying to listen and understand the everyday experience of women or Black women that everyday things that Black women experience. They're just going to throw it all away with, you know, and so those are the things that I think are they just have to be nuanced, because I do think somebody in passing can easily hear some very valid critiques that Khadijah says and miss the overall points of like the way she still said, I still critique misogyny. I still, you know, and that's very important. So you know, it's a tricky conversation, but you know, so I think we have to have different people speaking from different perspectives on the situation.
Yeah, and I gotta catch that episode. I've had some family challenges lately, but I do have to catch that. But yeah, you know, and I don't want to speak on something I haven't watched, but I do know that whenever someone has a critique of what they define as feminism, you know, it's always that, oh, you're following white women, you know, because don't get me started. I'm trying not to cuss, but yeah. So I do want to watch that, but you know, people lean too much on that. You know, as a Black women can't do shit on our own.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like, again, whenever you think about putting your line and your policies out and being clear on those things and who isn't, then you get to capture the people who think feminism is Kamala getting in office. You get you get to like redirect the abolitionism, everything.
But I don't talk about people. So you know,
what you say?
I said I don't fuck with those people.
Yeah, but again though, like, but if their ideas are in the mainstream, it's like you're gonna have to contend with them so that you can break down that barriers of like letting people think that this is what that is. You know, like you have to grapple.
I agree, but I struggle because I gotta stop being so. I don't really have to, but I choose to if I want to bring more people to an understanding. But let me tell you, you know, but no, I think that, you know, there are definitely conversations that, you know, must continue and are necessary, and, you know, like put your feelings aside, all that other stuff. Now, as far as Newark, y'all don't understand how many things I want to say because I have familial link, not direct familial, not like I'm related, but I have very close familial links to someone running the government there, and I'm just not like how y'all fight that? You know, like how do y'all, you know, especially when so many people think that fraction is way more conscious than he ever has been in his entire life. Like, how do you not, you know, end up serving, you know, the devil and thinking that you're doing something conscious, you know?
Is he a Baraka or Obama?
I don't know no Obama peoples.
He's moving like the Obama. Hey, listen, man, we gotta go. We appreciate y'all tuning in. If you're rewatching the show, get your ass in the comments and say something. Cherie gonna respond. I might respond. Cindy gonna respond.
I always respond.
I was at Howard the same exact time. Yes.
We don't want to hear that story. Listen,
it's not a puffy story, but no.
Puffy party at Howard. Yo, what y'all got coming up this weekend? Before we wrap.
Just headed to New York on Sunday. Because I gotta be in town next week to do some tech rehearsals, dress rehearsals. Got to figure out wig stuff, costume stuff, lighting stuff, sound stuff, just stuff. To get this show together. So yeah, I mean, I'll be just running lines. I got one birthday party I'm gonna sneak to, but other than that, just running lines and getting tight on this show. And then coming up with some more advertisement, because I mean I'm slacking because it's in a festival, but so they're mostly doing the marketing, but I do want to have more things to share week before, so I got to figure that out. But yeah, just all that stuff. But yeah, thank you guys for people that have been liking my stuff that I've been sharing about the show, and people that did follow me. I'm gonna put my thing in the chat again so you guys can follow. But yeah, I'll be talking more about the show. And yeah, anybody in New York, hit me up, put something in the comments. If you in the New York area, in New Jersey area, put something in the comments. I'll make sure you get the link to get a ticket and all of that stuff. It's a long link, so but I should put that somewhere. Got it.
Zenzi, what you got going on other than terrorizing people in all of the boroughs?
Hey, I gotta keep practice. This is a time when I'm going through some family things. I was sharing that I'm sorry that I missed the conference, and it probably wouldn't have been a good idea to go. I lost a very close aunt, and then my mother was in the hospital. So I'm sticking close to home and taking care of family for the meantime. So, send your good wishes. Mom is fine now, but mom is elderly, so I'm on edge. But I'm always going to be around, always going to be here, to do this work. So thank you.
Love it. Prayers to the family. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, stepping in. And listen, man, we're going to see y'all next week. Next week, something real special going to happen. Got a heavyweight coming through this month. Yeah. Listen, y'all. Peace, y'all.
Creciendo